Around 5:45 p.m. on Sunday, June 21st, 2020, 14-year-old biracial teenager Noah Donohoe hopped on his bike and headed from his South Belfast home to Cave Hill Country Park in North Belfast to meet some friends for a school project. The 7-mile journey would take Noah through Belfast City Centre and up the Antrim Road, a route he had taken many times before as a Catholic student at St. Malachy's College. But this journey would be anything but normal. At 5:50 p.m., Noah was seen on CCTV biking down Royal Avenue towards his turnoff for the Antrim Road. But by the time he got to the bottom of Royal Avenue at 5:53, CCTV captured Noah on his bike, but now without his backpack. And instead of turning left for the Antrim Road, Noah continued straight along Royal Avenue as it became the York Road, before turning left 2 streets later and veering right onto North Queen Street. 300 meters later, around 6 p.m., Noah fell from his bike at the intersection of North Queen Street and the York Road. A motorist stopped to help, but Noah quickly got back on his bike and kept cycling north along the York Road. 400 meters after that, Noah was seen biking past the Grove Wellbeing Center, only now without his green jacket. And at 6:02, Noah was captured on CCTV turning right onto Northwood Crescent from Scaganiel Avenue, still with his helmet, hoodie, shorts, and trainers. But a short distance later, Noah was spotted by a Northwood resident cycling towards the cul-de-sac at the top of the Northwood Road, except now he was completely naked. Noah then ditched his bike at the top of the Northwood Road and was last seen on CCTV at 6:03 p.m. walking between numbers 89 and 91 towards an area of waste ground behind the homes. The total time of Noah's bike ride was around 18 minutes. Noah's phone did not have credit, so he and his mother Fiona had agreed that Noah would call her from a friend's phone when he arrived at Cave Hill. But that call never came, and at 9:30 p.m., single mother Fiona Donohoe reported her only child missing to police. Noah's disappearance was quickly headline news, and on the evening of Monday the 22nd, Northwood resident Karen Crooks reported Noah's bike laying in her front garden.
Come home and then started to look on social media and saw the missing boy, and something alerted me to make me read into it a wee bit more, and I saw the Shore Road and I saw the black Apollo mountain bike, and my heart sank because I got the bike at my front door.
The search operation was now focused on the Northwood estate, a working-class Protestant enclave historically connected to the Mount Vernon UVF. Police search and rescue teams flooded the area and focused their investigation on the area behind Crook's house, and specifically a nearby storm drain. Noah's helmet, hoodie, and shoes would be found scattered around the Northwood Road, while Noah's phone was found a mile back in Castleton Park along North Queen Street. Noah's underwear, t-shirt, and shorts were never recovered. Some Northwood residents would report hearing screams in the area on the night of the 21st, and the residents who saw Noah biking naked would both tell police they thought it was a Father's Day prank. By Tuesday the 23rd, hundreds of volunteers from across the community joined the police in their search.
Our brothers are both in Noah's music class in school, and I taught him last year for a while in St. Malachy's, so it's quite close to home because it's such an interface area as well, seeing our communities come together with the Shore Road community and Fort William Park and just everybody coming together to find a child, because there's nothing more important than that.
3 days into the search around Northwood, on Wednesday the 24th, Police Superintendent Muir Clark held a press conference to say he believed Noah had traveled to North Belfast, fallen from his bike, and suffered a head injury, which may have led to him being disorientated and removing his clothes. He also added a message for Noah asking for a sign that he was safe and reminding him he wasn't in trouble. But on the same day as the press conference, the police got their first lead when a city center pawn shop reported that 33-year-old career criminal Daryl Paul had attempted to pawn Noah's laptop. That same day, police also received a tip that Paul tried to sell the laptop, backpack, and school books with Donohoe written on them at a party the night before. Daryl Paul was quickly arrested at his flat, where Noah's backpack and books were recovered. Paul would claim to have found Noah's bag lying against the University of Ulster building at the bottom of Royal Avenue on the evening of the 21st. And after failing to pawn the laptop because it had no power cord, he gave it to his girlfriend, Maria Nolan, for safekeeping. Paul took police to Nolan's flat at Queen's Quarter Housing, a hostel for people struggling with addiction issues that was also conveniently located across the street from the Donohue's South Belfast home. Noah's laptop was quickly recovered from Nolan's room, but still no Noah. By day 4, thousands of public volunteers and police teams covered terrain over and underground in the wider Northwood area. But with no clear answers, rumors spread fast. The discovery of Noah's laptop at a hostel opposite the Donohoe family home fueled public doubt on the police's version of events. That Noah had simply fallen from his bike, sustained a head injury, and then gone missing. But police had CCTV evidence that Daryl Paul and Maria Nolan were outside Queen's Quarter at the time Noah was last seen. And while being an opportunist thief, Paul could not be connected to Noah's disappearance. However, this is also when Superintendent Clark called off the volunteer search effort, thanking the public, but saying his men needed more room to operate. And it was also on this day that the unlocked drain was given a new padlock.
I'm worried about the fact that happened before with young Noah, that it could happen again with my children or other people's children, because if ours on that drain are too spacious, that someone within a young child could get down it.
Noah had been gone for 4 days, and the Donohoe family were beginning to fear for the worst. A fear that was only exacerbated by a sick Snapchat video posted on Thursday, the 25th.
So I don't think his family will be finding him for a bit. I just buried him, so I don't think his family will be finding him for a bit.
26-year-old Jamie Shaw, a former St. Malachy's pupil, would be arrested and charged with improper use of an electronic communications network. But Shaw was all talk, because police didn't believe he buried Noah Donohoe, or was even connected to the case at all. Because as it turned out, Noah wasn't buried anywhere.
I have some very sad news. I can confirm that our specialist police search and rescue team, who were continuing to search a storm drain complex, recovered the body of a young male in the North Belfast area just before 9:45 a.m. today.
On Saturday, June 27th, 6 days after Noah went missing, Fiona Donohue's worst nightmares came true. As police informed her they had found Noah's body 950 meters down the storm drain behind the Northwood estate. Investigators believed Noah sustained a head injury when he fell from his bike and climbed into the drain himself, with his official cause of death being accidental drowning. Noah's autopsy would reveal no drugs or alcohol in his system. The funeral of Noah Donohoe was held on July 1st, 2020, where his family and friends said their final I love yous and goodbyes before Noah's body was taken away to be cremated. A decision made by Fiona, who knew her son's worst fear was being alone in the dark. A subsequent police investigation would recover just 22 of the 180 CCTV cameras along Noah's route, and the final CCTV image of Noah walking between the two homes in Northwood would originally be time-stamped at 6:11, before being revised to 6:08, 6:05, and finally 6:03 p.m. This is significant because the last shot before it was at 6:02, when Noah was fully clothed entering Northwood. So the space in which Noah lost his clothing started at 9 minutes, before being adjusted to 6 minutes, 3 minutes, and finally 1 minute. Cops would attribute the error to an issue within the camera, but to Noah's family, the fluctuating timestamps looked like a blatant police cover-up. But it's worth keeping in mind that this last shot of Noah was taken from a home security camera, not a municipal one, and the camera's clock was likely set by the homeowner. But in August 2020, at a preliminary inquest into Noah's death, Coroner Joe McCriskin said there was no evidence to suggest that any other person was involved in Noah's passing. But with the full inquest experiencing delay after delay, the court of public opinion had plenty to say. In the weeks after Noah's passing, Fiona and her sister Neve would form what would become known as Noah's Army, a collective of supporters from across the community who wanted to see justice for Noah and answers from the PSNI. And the public wanted to know, how did Catholic teenager Noah Donohoe end up in a drain he couldn't have known existed, in a loyalist part of town he had never been? In September 2020, investigators revealed the gated hatch above the storm drain Noah entered had been unlocked following an inspection on June 18th, meaning it would have been possible for a person to climb into the drain on the day Noah disappeared. And during another inquest review, it was revealed the pathologist believed Noah had died within hours of entering the drain, giving his body 6 days to lay in the shallow water before he was discovered. But when Fiona identified Noah's corpse after he was found, she described him as being covered in dirt, with a 16-centimeter bump on the side of his forehead and water damage just to his hands and feet. Facts that were inconsistent with Noah being dead in the drain for 6 days. The pathologist who examined Noah's body also requested a water sample from Noah's lungs to be sure it matched the water from the drain. And while police told Fiona this sample would be taken, it never was, skyrocketing suspicions that the PSNI had something to hide. Because police also never provided Fiona with any updates during their investigation into Noah's death, letting her get it instead from the news or social media. Nor did they offer overtime at any point in the investigation, or make the necessary efforts to secure the missing CCTV, citing financial constraints and missing person fatigue, an attitude that shows far more interest in closing the case than getting to the bottom of it. But to play devil's advocate, it's worth noting that the PSNI were in a bad place. Between 2010 and 2020, the PSNI's annual budget reduced by 20%. That equaled 500 officers, a reduction more severe than most police forces in the UK. And because the Northern Ireland Assembly had fallen apart from 2017 to 2020, budget decisions were being made by a Secretary of State who lived in England. So coming into COVID, the PSNI were a shell of themselves, with less officers to do more work, and a tightly capped budget being decided at Westminster. Because, while none of that excuses bad decision-making, I do believe many police officers wanted to get to the bottom of Noah's death. They just weren't given the resources to do so. In January of 2021, Daryl Paul was sentenced to 3 months in prison for stealing Noah's backpack containing the laptop. But due to time served, he was released the same day. But Paul continued to deny any knowledge of what happened to Noah, sticking to his remarkable story of finding the backpack by chance. The backpack that belonged to his South Belfast neighbor. whose mother, Daryl Paul, was at absolute war with. Queens Quarter housing is a rough spot, with drug addicts who would otherwise be homeless rotating in and out of its rooms, making it a less than ideal area to live if you're raising a child like Noah. But Fiona Donohoe didn't have a lot of options, and so she raised Noah the best she could across the street. In the months before Noah's disappearance, Fiona had to call the police on Queens Quarter residents she saw using and selling drugs out front, getting them arrested, which would lead to those residents losing their beds and becoming homeless again. And 3 individuals rumored to be in and out of Queens Quarter housing at this time were Daryl Paul, Maria Nolan, and a 3rd individual we'll call Mr. J. While Daryl Paul was sticking to his story, Maria Nolan's had changed. In February 2021, it was revealed that the previous November, a woman identified by the Belfast Telegraph as Nolan made a statement claiming that it was common knowledge in the homeless community that Noah was assaulted and jabbed with a drug-filled needle as he passed through city center. And while denying she had anything to do with it, Nolan supposedly identified the perpetrator, adding that it was his group's MO to jab unsuspecting people with needles. It was an interesting story, but Noah had tested negative for drugs, and Nolan, an on-again, off-again heroin addict, was not a reliable witness. So after being interviewed by police, Maria Nolan withdrew her statement. But the speculation only grew. In June 2021, a former inmate at McGabry Prison told the Sunday World that another inmate broke down while they were incarcerated and admitted to killing Noah Donohoe, saying that he had been in the Northwood area to attack a sex offender, but saw Noah first and assaulted and abducted him. The inmate supposedly then confessed to killing Noah before contacting the UDA, not the UVF, to help dispose of the body. Both the inmate who relayed the story and the inmate who allegedly attacked Noah were interviewed by police, but the PSNI revealed in September 2021 that they had found no evidence to support the alleged confession. The inmate said to have killed Noah strongly denied the allegation, calling the other inmate delusional. But for the past year, rumors had been swirling that the police were protecting some kind of loyalist informant connected to Noah's death. And while there was no hard evidence to support that claim, beyond Noah disappearing in a loyalist area, in December of 2021, the cops only furthered public speculation when they applied for a public interest immunity order. A public interest immunity order, or PII, is applied to things like Noah's inquest, when the police feel a need to hide methodology, sources of information, and informants. So when the police applied for one in December 2021, it was seen by many as evidence that they were covering something or someone up. The Donohue's lawyer appealed the PII, but a judge upheld it in September 2022, concluding that none of the redacted information showed any sign of a third party involved in Noah's death, or any cover-up at all in the investigation. And I will take the judge's word, because while maybe the police are involved in an airtight murder cover-up with loyalist paramilitaries, a PII is not uncommon in a place like Northern Ireland. Noah disappeared in North Belfast UVF territory, and specifically Mount Vernon UVF territory. And when things go down, they know about it. So it would have been irresponsible for police not to speak to their informants in the area, even if that interaction didn't lead to anything worth investigating. But without a PII, the details of these meetings could be public in the inquest, exposing police procedure, putting informants' lives at risk, and making them less valuable as sources of information going forward. But that's just my opinion, and I know others will disagree. But if you want to read it yourself, I've attached a link in the description. Because, up until this point, any connection between the Mount Vernon UVF and Noah's death was pure speculation. But that would change in December 2022, when Mount Vernon UVF vet William Logue Miller was charged with harassing Fiona Donohoe over a 6-month Twitter campaign of intimidation, calling her fucking nuts and unhinged, while using sectarian and racist language. Miller, a Northwood resident and nephew of notorious Mount Vernon UVF killer and informant Mark Haddock, served time as a 19-year-old for a 1997 UVF attack on an LVF pub. And his last name holds a lot of weight in Loyalist North Belfast, with his uncle Davy Miller, the head of the Mount Vernon UVF at the time Noah disappeared. So some people naturally wondered if Logue Miller had a deeper connection to Noah's disappearance, and if his uncle Davy knew about it, but was being protected by police. But I would ask, being protected why? The collusion and murderous history of the Mount Vernon UVF was exposed long ago in Police Ombudsman Nuala O'Loan's 2007 Operation Ballast report, including murders Davy Miller took part in under the leadership of Mark Haddock. So if the theory is that someone like Miller could expose information about collusion between the police and the Mount Vernon UVF, I'm personally not buying that. Also, Davy Miller was forced out of Mount Vernon in late 2023 as part of the wider UVF's purge against drug dealers within the organization, losing Miller any protections that may have come with his leadership role. Logue Miller pled guilty to harassment in June 2023 and would ultimately receive 2 years probation, with the judge noting Logue Miller's poor mental health. And while despicable, the case against him revealed nothing that actually connected Logue Miller or the Mount Vernon UVF to Noah's death. But that same month, the case would become even stranger when it was revealed that newfound CCTV captured Noah taking a late-night walk the morning of his disappearance. At 3:30 a.m. on June 21st, 2020, Noah Donohoe was seen exiting his South Belfast home in the pouring rain, wearing a t-shirt, shorts, flip-flops, and carrying headphones. But when he returned 35 minutes later, just as dawn was breaking, Noah was soaking wet, but without his headphones and flip-flops. It was a shocking revelation for Fiona, who didn't think Noah could have gone outside without her knowing, and once again pointed a finger at the police, who had either been hiding the footage for 2 years, or again failed to properly check all CCTV connected to Noah's comings and goings on the day he disappeared. But where Noah went and how he lost his sandals and headphones remained a mystery, adding another strange layer to the strangest missing persons case Belfast had ever seen. And while Fiona firmly believed there was more than the police's version of events, that Noah sustained a head injury and climbed into the drain in a confused state, in July 2023, a new version of events came to light. A psychiatrist's report into Noah's death being prepared for the coroner revealed a fresh narrative that Noah had taken his own life in the drain while suffering from low mood and struggling with his sexuality. The psychiatrist, with a background in custodial adult suicide, referenced things like Noah's obsession with controversial psychologist Jordan Peterson, a school book of his with gay written on it, and internet searches for how to ward off Satan. The psychiatrist's report boldly concluded that Noah could not square off being gay with his perception of Peterson's views of the future. The report was rejected by everyone who knew Noah, and most importantly, his mom. Fiona described her child as having normal 14-year-old mood swings, but in no way was he suicidal. And while it seemed very clear to those who knew Noah that he liked girls, Fiona had brought him up around same-sex relationships and knew Noah would have no trouble accepting whichever sexuality he was. But the report would be inconclusive on how Noah lost his clothes, with the psychiatrist wondering if it reflected a deeper quasi-religious symbolism. But months later, in October 2023, the focus would shift back to the UVF, when graffiti in West Belfast's Lenadoon estate claimed Noah was murdered in a 10th floor bathtub in Mount Vernon, with Vernon and murdered both misspelled. Notes found beside the graffiti claimed Noah was tortured and murdered by the UVF on the 10th floor of the Mount Vernon flats, accompanied by messages like, "Emma Adair told me to protect her. Noah was tortured and thrown in a drain pipe. And I'm dead for telling Andersonstown." However, if you were actually trying to expose knowledge of Noah's murder and protect the person who told you, I'm not sure why you would want to make her name public. The graffiti was quickly brought to the attention of police, but they did not make any arrests, seeing it likely as nothing more than rumor. And I would probably agree. The narrative, the Loyalists killed Noah, had almost exclusively come from Republican sources to this point. And the Mount Vernon UVF, a Catholic killing machine in the 90s, is still hated deeply in places like Republican West Belfast. And I would not have a hard time believing the more extreme residents of Lenadoon would take any opportunity to smear the well-known UVF stronghold. The case would go quiet for the next few months until August 2024, when Coroner Joe McCriskin recused himself from the inquest, with the courts ordering that no details of his reasoning be made public. The recusal would push back the scheduled September opening to the inquest, and with a new coroner having to catch up on Noah's case, the inquest is currently set for September 2025. But in October 2024, an inquest review heard that a photo of a hand had been taken on Noah's phone 40 minutes after he was last seen in Northwood. The photo, believed to be a palm and a finger, is not Noah's hand, and was likely taken inadvertently by someone in Castleton Park who picked up his phone. Noah Donohoe has been dead for nearly 5 years, and his family are still no closer to the justice they deserve. But whatever theory you believe, it can be agreed that the police's version of events is debatable, to say the least, because while falling off his bike and hitting his head could lead to serious brain injury, Noah was wearing a helmet at the time he fell, and it does not explain how he lost his backpack or got off course in the first place. At 5:50 p.m. on Sunday, June 21st, 2020, Noah was seen biking down Royal Avenue with his backpack. But by the time he got to the bottom of Royal Avenue at 5:53, his backpack was gone. And in this window of time, there is nothing but missing CCTV, with Fiona Donohue's solicitor Niall Murphy publicly appealing for any businesses on Royal Avenue between North Street and the Belfast Telegraph Building to review their cameras. Because one look at Google Maps reveals that smack dab in the middle of that stretch is Extern, a homeless support service that offers a clean needle exchange on Sundays, the kind of place that would have been well known to the likes of those residing at Queen's Quarter housing, like heroin addicts Daryl Paul, Maria Nolan, and Mr. J. And while Noah tested negative for drugs, it's important to note that synthetic drugs are challenging to detect on a standardized drug test. And synthetics have had a deadly effect on the homeless community in Northern Ireland in recent years, with the synthetic opioid known as nitazene responsible for 6 deaths in 2023. Because, while cheaper than the real thing and often stronger, synthetic users rarely know exactly what they're putting into their bodies. I will also note that the synthetic cannabinoid known as spice is the most common synthetic drug in Northern Ireland, and while normally found in an herbal form, spice is also available in a liquid most commonly used in vapes. I also want to stress that the last recording of Noah is of him walking towards the area where the drain was. This area was not a public park and was only accessible to the public from the backyards of the homes atop the Northwood Road, meaning that if Noah was abducted, someone would have been captured on CCTV following him in to the grassy area before taking him elsewhere to murder him, and then either returning to the spot where he was taken, or known about another entry point for the drain, likely only accessible by the Department of Infrastructure. It's not impossible, but I don't believe Noah was murdered by loyalists. I also don't believe the police's version of events. And I definitely don't believe that Noah committed suicide because he was ashamed of being gay. I believe Maria Nolan. And here's what I think happened. Around 5:45 p.m., Noah Donohoe set out for Cave Hill Country Park. And at this time, CCTV shows Daryl Paul and Maria Nolan sitting outside Queen's Quarter housing, the same footage that would later dismiss Paul as a suspect. And according to a podcast interview, Fiona Donohoe, who has seen the footage, says Paul and Nolan clearly saw Noah riding off with his backpack containing the laptop. And as drug-addicted thieves, they would have known how to spot valuables. And when Noah turned left onto the Ormeau Road, it would have been easy to work out that he was headed to City Center. Once Noah got to City Center, I think it's obvious that something happened to him on Royal Avenue between 5:50 and 5:53 p.m. And it's also very interesting that Fiona's lawyer has publicly called for all businesses between North Street and the Belfast Telegraph to review their CCTV. Because somewhere in that gap, Noah lost his backpack, which was later recovered by Daryl Paul, who had seen Noah 5 minutes earlier. And in my opinion, that is too much of a coincidence to believe. The bag was left in an area well known to the drug addict community and could not have been there long before Daryl Paul found it. Meaning it's not crazy to wonder if Daryl Paul might have been in touch with someone about the bag he saw headed into town on the back of Noah. And maybe, just maybe, that person left the bag for Daryl Paul to find. But in news coverage of the statement she eventually withdrew, Maria Nolan said Noah wasn't just assaulted. He was jabbed with a drug-filled needle. But jabbing a 14-year-old with street drugs or synthetic street drugs is not your average crime. And it would have taken someone with hate in their heart to have done this to a child. Or maybe attack that child to get to someone else. And while the substance was rumored to be heroin, only the person who pressed down on the needle will ever really know. But in my experience, most heroin addicts prefer keeping heroin for themselves. And as Noah biked along Royal Avenue, so begins the 3-minute gap in time. And during this stretch, at one time Maria Nolan believed Noah was assaulted and injected. And if one were to believe that recollection, it would explain why Noah no longer had his backpack when he was next seen and missed his turn, as a dangerous reaction set off in his teenage body. Most street drugs and synthetic street drugs are meant to block pain receptors in the brain and can prevent the sensations of hot and cold. And while pleasant to many, in an overdose situation, the body can mistakenly believe it is overheating or freezing. And as Noah biked away from Royal Avenue, he began to show every sign of a hypothermic reaction. And if something like that were the case, Noah would have had no idea, as many experiencing the symptoms of hypothermia don't know it's happening. as the person begins to feel confused, disorientated, and combative to help. So maybe it's possible a confused, disorientated, and very high Noah biked past his turn, turned left half a mile later, and turned right on North Queen Street before throwing away his phone, and falling from his bike at the intersection with the York Road, before biking away again before a motorist could help. A more advanced stage of hypothermia involves what's known as paradoxical undressing. As the condition gets worse, the person's body will invoke a survival mechanism, where a rush of warm blood cells from the core is shot into the extremities, causing the person to feel like they're burning up and remove their clothes. And as a disorientated Noah biked into Northwood, he did exactly that, getting rid of the clothes on his body and the helmet on his head. Often in tandem with paradoxical undressing is an apparent self-protective behavior called terminal burrowing, where those affected will seek out and enter small enclosed spaces in a primitive, burrowing-like behavior, most often seen in hibernating animals. And as Noah reached the end of Northwood Crescent on his bike, he turned left towards the dead-end cul-de-sac atop the Northwood Road. This is where Noah ditched his bike and was last seen on camera entering a backyard leading to the grassy area behind the homes, which put Noah 60 feet from the drain. And whether he heard it or just walked in that direction, there is currently no evidence beyond rumor that he did anything but find the drain on his own accord and climb inside, and to end up where he was found 950 meters away. Noah would have had to have crawled deeper and deeper into the drain, unaware of the incredible danger he was putting himself in. But I don't think Noah died that night, because to end up where he was found, it would have taken him some time. And I think if the hypothermia was drug-induced, not temperature-induced, the symptoms may have worn off as the substance passed through his system. However, Noah would have been in a very bad state and in need of serious medical attention, with no food or drinkable water. But at some point, he may have sobered up enough to know he was lost in the pitch black, his greatest fear. When Fiona Donohoe saw Noah's body, she said the only water damage was to his hands and feet. And in my opinion, that is much more consistent with Noah crawling through a drain for an extended amount of time than being drowned in a bathtub and placed there face down. That's why I think it's possible an exhausted, decimated, and very lost Noah spent days struggling to crawl through the drain, not knowing how far he'd gone or in what direction. And eventually, Noah's spirit left his body as he closed his eyes, dropped to the floor, and became submerged in the shallow water. And while the police say they found Noah on the 27th, I will just say it is interesting that Muir Clark called off the public search on the 25th, the same day a new padlock was installed on the drain. And it's also interesting that Mr. J moved out of Queen's Quarter housing the day after Noah went missing. But while interesting, we will likely never know exactly what happened to Noah Donohoe. But what is certain is the absolute mess of an investigation this was by the police. Because while they were both underfunded and understaffed, it does not excuse the chain of bad decisions that only led to more bad decisions in an effort to cover up previous bad decisions. I think the PSNI were likely as confused by Noah's case as the public, but were afraid to admit that, and instead jumped to obvious conclusions, like him sustaining a head injury when he fell from his bike. Top brass like Muir Clark were clearly more interested in protecting their badges than getting to any truth for the Donohoe family, and their brave, unrelenting march for justice in the name of Noah If Noah Donohoe were alive today, he would be 19 years old, in his first year of university, possibly at his dream school, Trinity College in Dublin. COVID lockdowns would have been a distant memory, with his bright future giving him everything to look forward to. Because Noah Donohoe was and is, in many ways, the face of a changing Northern Ireland. And while it's unlikely anyone will ever be charged with Noah's death, certain people will forever have to live with the decisions they made, things they can never reconcile, come to terms with, or take back. Decisions that will eat at them a little more, day after day after day. Because, to quote Noah's favorite author, Jordan Peterson, no one gets away with anything, ever.